Good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, March 7th. And after the podcast yesterday, it was a crazy day for me. Phone calls, some investigation, some research. And I was going to go over this article yesterday, but I was able to get some more information and the research done and the knowledge that I needed. So I need to make a correction from some discussions I had about why aren't the law enforcement here in Arizona arresting these bus drivers who are transporting illegals? Because it was part of the SB 1070. But I read this article, and I'm going to bring it up on the screen so that you can see which article I'm talking about. So we're going to share this for you. So it was an article that said, Senator resurrects part of Arizona's SB 1070 that judge ordered state not to enforce. This was an article that they had done February 11th, 2024, but it was updated February 7th of the original was 2022, and it was just updated February 7th of 2024. So legislation was approved by a Senate panel, and it's saying in this article that it could result in the federal government once again suing Arizona over its law dealing with illegal immigration. So without comment, the Judiciary Committee voted to make it a felony to transport or harbor someone not in this country legally. Senate Bill 1379 would also impose the same penalty on those who encourage or induce someone from another country to come here in violation of the law. It was proposed by Senator Wendy Rogers, and it takes an existing law, a part of the state's highly controversial SB 1070, and increases the penalties. So, but it also said in this article, but attorneys for the state signed a deal in 2014 with the U.S. Department of Justice agreeing not to enforce that law. And I thought, what is this? So in exchange, federal attorneys said they would drop their legal challenge to the Papers, Please part of SB 1070, the 2010 law that sought to create new state laws to deter illegal immigration. Now, what the Papers, Please is when somebody is stopped, when the law enforcement stops somebody, they can't just stop them suspecting they are an illegal. They have to have committed some sort of traffic violation. Or if they show up at their house for a domestic violence situation, they can ask for their papers then to prove that they're in the country legally. So the federal government said, you know what, we're going to leave that alone. We're going to let you guys keep doing that. But in exchange, you guys are not going to enforce the part of the law where people could be arrested and charged for transporting illegals. Now, it's kind of confusing because Sheriff Daniels, Sheriff Lamb in Pinal County, and I'm sure Sheriff Wilmot down in Yuma, if there is a situation where they think there's human smuggling going on, there's many, many high chases. Sheriff Daniels has them all the time down there in Cochise County. But, and those people are pulled over. I mean, usually they crash or they speed off and, go into a field, and then everybody jumps out of the car and they scatter. But those people are arrested. So there are some parts of that. And this is what I want to get a little more, what am I saying? I want to get it more confirmed. And I want to talk to Sheriff Daniels and say, how can you still be doing that? And if this person who's driving the car has done some sort of traffic violation and they start following them or turn the lights on and they start speeding away, then yes, I believe that's a situation where they can be pulled over, obviously, because they've committed a traffic crime. So I just want to confirm that with Sheriff Daniels, and I'll let you guys know next week. But so the deal was reduced to an order signed by U.S. District Judge Susan Bolton, permanently enjoining enforcement of the law. And at a hearing Thursday, and I believe that this was in February, Rogers said she was simply trying to provide a new tool for border sheriffs like Mark Daniels of Cochise County to use against smugglers. Roger never mentioned the 2014 court order or even indicated she was aware of it, as the Republican-dominated Judiciary Committee approved the measure on a 5-3 party-line vote. Senator Martin Quezada, who's a Democrat in Glendale, voted against it, said that the state is risking being dragged back into federal court over an issue that was settled years ago. This was an agreement that the state of Arizona made, knowing it would have been struck down anyway. The fact that we're amending it and now we're going to ask to enforce it, we're putting ourselves right back into court. That's all that this is doing, nothing more than that. Well, I talked to a legislator yesterday. I called Jacqueline Parker down at the Capitol. She's a very good friend of mine. And she was sweet enough, because when I first was asking her about this and how do I get a copy of this court order, she's saying you'll have to get a hold of the judge's office. So I got a hold of Susan Bolton's office, and they weren't very helpful. Just told me I have to come down to downtown Phoenix and go to the courthouse and go to customer service. And probably within 10 minutes of me ending that call, I get a text message from Jacqueline Parker, and her staff had looked it up and she sent me a copy of the court order. So I'm going to share that with you, because, you don't realize what state officials and what's happened in the past. And, everybody's gung-ho about bringing new laws forward and making things better. And you have to be very, very careful about what's happened in the past. So this is the court. This isn't the actual court order, but this is a joint case disposition. So you had all these litigators. You had, of course, the ACLU Foundation, Immigrants' Right Project, National Immigration Law Center, Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund. The list goes on and on and on. And attorneys for plaintiffs have an additional co-counsel on subsequent pages. Look at all of this. These are all the people that were involved in this. And it was Valley del Sol are the plaintiffs versus Michael B. Whiting, defendant, and Doug Ducey, intervenor defendant. So anyway, let's come down here. Plaintiffs and intervenor defendants have conferred regarding the outstanding matters in this case and have reached an agreement on a proposed disposition of the case. The parties make the following representations and request that the court enter the proposed final order. So the parties have stipulated and agreed to resolve Valley del Sol versus Whiting. I need to look into that case a little bit further, so I have more knowledge of what that was all about. But so it probably has something to do with somebody being arrested for transporting illegals. And I would venture to guess that it would be somebody with the Mexican American Fund or American Civil Liberties Union Foundation or the Immigrants' Rights Project, National Immigration Law. I mean, all these NGOs and how they transport these people all over not only the state of Arizona, but the country. So I'm sure that case probably had something to do with that. But basically it says in this that first, a part of its agreement with the plaintiffs, intervenor defendants will issue the attached informal Attorney General opinion, which provides guidelines on the implementation of Senate Bill 1040's Section 2B and 2D, among other sections. The informal Attorney General opinion reflects the state's interpretation of legal requirements and limitations for implementing Sections 2B and 2D. There's a Exhibit A I'll get to. Second, both parties stipulate that ARS 283511 A, 1, D, and E should be enjoined and ask this court to enjoin those provisions. These are impoundment provisions that apply when there is a predicate offense under the harboring, transporting, or concealing provisions codified at ARS 132929, which have been enjoined in this litigation and a related case. So that's what it was about with the Valley del Sol versus Whiting. It was about harboring, transporting, or concealing. But so basically, they've agreed Third, the plaintiffs further settle any claim they have for attorney fees related to this case and all of its appeals for the sum of $1.4 million. The intervenor defendants agree to pay $1.4 million to plaintiffs' counsel to resolve any liability for attorney fees and costs from this case. $1.4 million. Who's the intervenor defendant? Go back up to the top. Doug Ducey, state of Arizona. So the state of Arizona paid $1.4 million, and this was back this was filed, it's in the 16th. I believe this was in 2014 is what I was under the impression this was under. But it was filed in September of 2016. So a couple years later, this all ended up happening. But, and the last page says, fourth, upon approval by the court of the proposed order filed herewith, and the terms agreed to by the parties will not further challenge the court's ruling at docket number 1285 or any other rulings in this litigation. So when I was talking to Jacqueline Parker down at the Capitol, I was asking her, because she's an attorney too. And so we were talking about how do we get around this? And the agreement where it says nothing will be challenged on that case, she said it only applies to the people listed and named in that case. So legislators can do something about it. And I think that's what Wendy Rogers was trying to do. But, and I was saying to Jacqueline, the way that things have changed from 2014, 2016, when all this was handled and going through the court system, things have changed drastically. And would a judge look at things a little bit different? Because at that point, that was the Obama and going into the Trump era or the Trump administration time frame wise. But yeah, it would have been Trump in September of 16. Yeah. So anyway, things have changed. We didn't have an invasion. We didn't have states like Texas and states like Arizona where people are calling to say, let's declare this an invasion so that state rights and laws can be implemented, and we can go down to the border and make a stand and a show like Texas is doing. So things are different now. So would a judge look at this ruling differently, or if the legislation brought another bill forward and it ended up passing? I mean, it's not going to because of Governor Hobbs, but if we got enough bipartisan support down there at the Capitol and she vetoed it, these legislators could try and override the veto and be strong about it. But what person in their right mind, and I don't care if you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, what person in their right mind wouldn't want somebody arrested for transporting illegals through the state of Arizona? And because of what's happening in Texas, this influx of human trafficking is pushing its way west to Arizona and to California. You've got these huge enclaves that the non-governmental organizations, the NGOs, have put together down at the border here in Arizona, which absolutely look like trash heaps. They're disgusting. And I can't even believe that the state is allowing them to be out there desecrating the desert and, having these tarps flailing in the wind. And it just doesn't look very hygienic. It's just disgusting what they're doing. And these people are down there helping them out. And then because Border Patrol doesn't come around into some of those areas for 3-4 days at a time. And so, a bus will come by, they'll load all of them on, and then more groups will come in and they'll be stuck there for a day, 2, 3, 4 days till Border Patrol comes by and picks them up. So, but what person in their right mind, no matter your political affiliation, and I know a lot of these Democrats just think it's ridiculous, but we need to start arresting these people who are transporting illegals through the state. because those buses that some of these NGOs have that show up to these groups of people out in the desert or along the highway or wherever they're picking them up for, or in the shelters that they've managed to get to, do they search these people to see if they've got fentanyl strapped to their bodies? Do they search them to see if there's weapons? Do they do any sort of vetting before they let them on their buses or into their shelters? What are they doing? I want that information. I want to know if they're actually being searched and stripped like you or I would be as an American citizen at the airport, which we all know down in Texas that it was going on where the illegals were never stripped. You know, they didn't have to be through an x-ray machine. Their backpacks and stuff didn't have to go through the x-ray machines. They could just walk through the metal detector with an open bottle of soda. And even if something went off, you know, they do a wand thing and do a small little pat down. They wouldn't invade your body the way that these TSA agents do to American citizens. It's just disgusting what goes on there at the Texas airports down at in the border cities. But so what are these NGOs doing? And then transporting them. So are these NGOs now becoming transporting people who have drugs on them or in their bags or in their backpacks? So now what are you considered? Drug smugglers? You know, this is a danger of not allowing this type of transportation to be stopped because we don't know what these people are bringing into our country. And how many of these NGOs really pay attention to these people and their illnesses and what may be ailing them? And then, you know, somebody shows up and they're deathly sick and they get them to the hospital. And of course, they get free medical care. But what are they exposing the hospital staff to? What are they exposing other people around them in the emergency room to? These illnesses and sicknesses that are coming from these illegals from third world countries is alarming. Measles cases is on the upward tick down there in Florida. Many cases of the measles are showing up. And, you know, the state of Florida, they just passed a huge immigration bill, which I don't know if any of it's in litigation. I don't know if the ACLU and all of those places that were named in that lawsuit, I don't know if they've gone after Texas because it's illegal to transport illegals in the state of Florida. If you cross over the state line and you are knowingly transporting people here illegally, you can get fined, arrested, and charged with a crime in Florida now. So how are they able to get that type of legislation passed in the state of Florida with no kickback? When we tried to do it in Arizona, of course, you know, back in 2010, when this was all going on and Russell Pierce was putting this through, of course, it was a bigger deal because it wasn't such a hotbed and a hot mess at the border with the millions of people coming over. It was more about the Democrats and the media putting the fear into our Hispanic communities here in Mesa that they were going to be targeted, that you were going to be pulled over just because your skin was brown, which is the furthest thing from the truth. And, you know, law enforcement is trained to kind of see and recognize behavior of people and driving probably not the way that an American citizen would be, because we understand signs, we can read. But, and you know, a lot of these people who transport illegals throughout our state are American citizens, but law enforcement is kind of trained to understand and see things differently than we would as just citizens. So, got to get a hold of, because my good friend Angel Mom Cayenne Michael is the one who got that legislation passed through down in Florida last year. They're working on another piece right now. It came out of the House, going to the Senate. It's going to be approved there. And Governor DeSantis will come there to Jacksonville, where Representative Michael lives, and sign it into law, which is they aren't going to give illegals any sort of IDs, state IDs. They won't recognize IDs that are given to them from North Carolina or if Arizona gave them a driver's license, it won't be recognized in the state of Florida if they're there driving, because they're illegally present in our country and they shouldn't even be given a driver's license. So Florida and Texas have governors who have a backbone and who are going to sign things like this into law. You've got Governor Abbott in Texas, who's going to, thumb his nose at the federal government and tell them, I've declared this an invasion and we're putting concertina wire up and we're going to stop this. It's amazing how the numbers have come down there in in Texas. And then, of course, the liberals and the Democrats, even those who live there in those cities and towns, complain about the fact that, our businesses are suffering because of this. The people who are in Mexico and have the proper paperwork to be able to cross the border and come into the United States and shop and go back home, those people are still doing that. Like in Eagle Pass, this influx of all of these people. So what? The business owners in Eagle Pass want to make money off of the misery of these people who are, being human trafficked and abused by the cartel, and God knows where they came from. But when you look at a map, which I did last night, I was pulling the whole map up. When you look at the map, and see, so a lot of these Chinese and a lot of the African illegals, they're flying into Ecuador. And then, because I guess that country just allows them to come in there. And I think without passports, if I'm correct, if I'm remembering the article that I was reading, but they come into Ecuador. Let me pull up a map. I want to see if I can. Let me see. I think it's Google Maps, because that shows it the best. It is Google Maps. Hold on, and I'll share this with you as soon as I have it picked up. So, because I really wanted to see where the Darien Gap was, because I you hear about it, but I didn't know exactly where it was. So this is the Darien National Park. This is a dense, crazy jungle right inside of Panama. So these illegals, a lot of them are flying into Ecuador, and then they come up here into Colombia, and they're able to get up here to the Darien Gap. So once they get to Ecuador, fly into wherever they are, I don't know that they're that free to fly into Colombia, and I know not Venezuela. But anyway, so they come up from Ecuador, come up here to the border of Panama, and then this is the Darien Gap jungle. So this is the terrible, terrible trek that most of these people take, and it takes them days and days. I mean, Ben Berkwin, if you follow him on social media, on Instagram, he's got a ton of new footage. He just went through the Darien Gap, I think, for the 4th or 5th time. He's an amazing journalist, and he has a lot of personal stories of people that he talked to while he was there. I highly suggest you go to Instagram and look him up, Ben, and it's BENGQUAM, Berkwin. So you can see that there's no roads. I don't know how close they get when they're brought in, but there's no roads. And I don't know what these are showing, these little dotted lines. Maybe they're dirt roads and stuff, but they have to get up and over there. And I think they end up right here, because this is where the road is. After they go through the jungle, they end up here in, Visa. And then they're able to go ahead and continue their trek to Panama City. And then they get up here to Costa Rica. And then they go up through Nicaragua. And they get through Honduras, Guatemala. And then they get into Mexico and head up. So you can see this is a very long way for these people to go. From all the way down here at Ecuador. And this is what the Chinese are doing. Ecuador, up through Colombia, up through the Darien Gap, all the way up through all of these countries, Costa Rica, Honduras, Guatemala. They get up into Mexico, and then they either end up over here in Texas or here in here in southern Arizona, and it's usually more towards this area. And then they also go into California. So yeah, and El Paso, I don't know how strong they are right there in El Paso right now. I know that Shelby Park, which is outside of Eagle Pass, or in Eagle Pass, that's where the concertina wire is. But I don't know what's happening. Let me see if I can enlarge this and bring up Eagle Pass. Because it's a very small little town. Where's Del Rio? Brackettville. Hidalgo. I don't know. Rio Grande, Roma. Crazy when you get onto a map like this and you're trying to find these teeny weeny little cities. Anyway, so the state of Texas, of course, has passed the CD4, and of course there is court pushback on that. They're challenging that law right now. It's on hold, and but like I said, I don't know if any of that stuff in Florida is being challenged, because all that stuff was implemented. He signed it into law, and I haven't heard or read any kickback about it. So I'm going to get a hold of Representative Michael. Their session's over with already in Florida. They'll be heading home this weekend, so I'll be able to talk to her next week and maybe get her on in the next week or two to give us an update on the Florida legislation and what they did this last session. So I just wanted to make sure that I was being telling the truth. I was under the impression with this SB 1070 that law still stood. So anyway, I want to go back to what Jacqueline Parker was saying. We can bring, and maybe it's something to have a discussion with Wendy Rogers when I get elected into office at the end of this year and go and start session next January. But to talk about resurrecting this and the argument that we would be able to have in court at the time if they challenge it, which they will. Everybody keeps a close eye on Arizona. You know, when SB 1070 was passed, they were saying our state's going to suffer. Businesses aren't going to bring their conventions here. And for a short little bit, because that's what all of the mainstream media was beating their drum about, a lot of people were canceling their stuff, because that was kind of the beginning fringe edges of cancel culture, to where mainstream media was talking about something, then you better not be doing it. When you think about it, that goes back to 2010, 2011. And so a lot of places were canceling at our convention centers. But, Arizona's got the weather, they've got the climate to where these people are drawn here to have their conventions. And so it was pretty short-lived. It blew over, especially when people found out that the Supreme Court was involved in SB 1070. And a lot of people are under the misconception that the whole thing was just thrown out. Well, it wasn't. But now we know that one of the most important things, transporting illegals throughout the state, was one of them. And that was kind of done, the way I'm looking at it, it was kind of done sneakily, because I've looked at different articles talking about SB 1070 and how it's evolved through the years and what's left of the actual bill. And I never knew about this court ruling. So that's pretty interesting that that's kept under wraps, and then it ended up costing the state $1.4 million. So anyway, I'll keep. I said, like I said, I'm going to check into the Florida legislation and see what's going on with if they're having any challenges. That was that deal. See, and this is another article, and this is their famous thing to do. Every time in the state of Arizona that we talk about any type of immigration law, the mainstream media, and of course AZ Central, the Arizona Republic, and Ray Stern, they're total liberals. And so they say the new immigration law would devastate Arizona's economy. Opponents say the numbers say otherwise. So activists and business people and Democratic lawmakers warned. And of course, Governor Hobbs already vetoed this bill, so it's not even going to happen. But this is some of the arguments. At a news conference at the state capitol's Rose Garden, opponents of the new House Concurrent Resolution 2060 claimed the state was heading in the same direction as in 2010 when the state's reputation and economy took a hit from Senate Bill 1070. Look, I understand back in 2010 why people around the country would have been like, why are they doing this? Why are they stopping? Why would they want to pull Hispanics over? Because that's the way that the media made it seem that we were targeting Mexican Americans in Arizona. And that was the farthest thing from the truth. But of course, and that's when they brought in racial profiling, all these types of labels. So, but now the majority of Americans understand the dangers and the insanity of unfettered illegal immigration and open borders. And they understand what it's doing to our country. And they understand what it's doing to our communities. And they understand what it's doing to our economy. So for these Democrats to say the state's reputation and economy took a hit, look at Texas's reputation right now. And look at Florida's last year when they passed that sweeping immigration bill. Their reputations are like, Americans are saying, hell yes, somebody's finally standing up to this administration. So I don't think it's going to be a bad thing. And as far as the economy, look, how much worse can we get than where we're at right now? Take the hit. Ooh, 5 companies aren't going to come and bring their conventions here in the next year because of this bill. I doubt that. I doubt those companies would probably jump on that bandwagon because they understand that this open border and this invasion is probably affecting their companies. So, but their arguments are the same all the time when it comes to illegal immigration laws that are brought up here in the state of Arizona. So the law, they were saying that SB 1070, the law enabled local police to act as immigration officers. It resulted in a number of boycotts against Arizona and an unknown number of undocumented workers leaving the state. That was great. They needed to leave the state. And that was a big deal about SB 1070 because they said it kind of took care of the problem itself. And these illegals were scared and frightened because of everything they were hearing on the mainstream media. And they packed up and left and went to other states. A lot of them went over to California. More power to you. We don't need people living illegally in the state of Arizona. Much of the law was held unconstitutional in subsequent court battles, but police still have the limited ability to question the immigration status of people they encounter. And that was the biggest thing. What's ironic is that was the biggest part of SB 1070 that everybody was screaming and yelling about. They could just pull somebody over with brown skin and say, show me your papers. That's what they say when it says show me your papers. That's what they're referring to as SB 1070. But isn't it ironic that that's the part of the law that ended up staying in place? And they went in and kind of dissected. And of course, wording is very important when you're putting bills and laws together. And when I was speaking to Michael Banks, the border czar there in Texas, when I was over there a few weeks ago, he was saying to me, because they took the SB 1070 bill and kind of dissected it and went through, And that's where they got a lot of their ideas and verbiage and thought to put SB4 together there in Texas. But he said they understood why some of the things were thrown out. It was because of the words and the verbiage of how things were put together by Russell Pierce, and that they corrected that when they put SB4 together. So litigation, bills and laws, it's always, changing, evolving, circumstances change. So in 2025, if we're able to put something together there at the legislation and, get Wendy Rogers and get a group of us good conservative type legislators together and work with the Senate side, would a judge, once these ACLU and all these places, come after us, would a judge recognize the difference in the landscape of what's happening in the United States versus now versus from 2014 and 16? Absolutely, I think they would. And we've got arguments to show, the rising crime, the excessive accidents from these people transporting human, and this is a lot of people down there in Cochise County, individuals who they get paid $1,500, $2,000 a person from the border and bring them up to Phoenix or to Tucson. Those are a lot of the high-speed chases that you see going on down there. You don't hear about buses from these NGOs having a high-speed chase because they know they're scot-free. They're getting, millions and billions of dollars from the federal government that's handed to these NGOs to do the dirty work that the federal government doesn't have the manpower or the stomach to do. So they just give the money to the NGOs and say, you go down there and pick these, people up from the border. You transport them, you house them, you feed them. And on the flip side of all that, it's yours and my wallet that they're sneaking into our house at night and taking our money out of to fund this thing. We don't have a say in this as taxpayers, that we agree to support them the way that they're doing. This is exorbitant amounts of money. $451 billion is what is expected to support these illegals in the United States in 2024. And I guarantee you it's going to be more than that. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about Social Security because my granddaughters were asking me, how does that work? Because it comes out of our paycheck. And so I was explaining the whole Social Security thing, but I said to them, it may not be available when you retire. The money may not be there. And the Social Security fund and the money that comes out of our checks as working Americans, and we're forced to participate in it, that money should be in an interest-bearing account and not being touched by the federal government. There would be more than enough money to pay the Social Security recipients and not have the fear of it's going to go away in the future, it's going to be bankrupt. It's going to be bankrupt because our slimy politicians there in DC decided decades ago that they could go ahead and just raid the Social Security fund because they had shortages here and there for their pet projects and things that the American voters didn't approve of. We'll just go raid the Social Security fund and get the money that we need to do these things. Congress is the purse strings. They're the ones who say this is the way American taxpayer funds can be spent. So my big question is, where the hell is the $451 billion coming from that has been estimated will cost the United States this year? Where is that money coming from? Congress didn't approve it. There's been no bill that's been passed that say we're setting aside for $451 billion to support the illegals and support this invasion that this rogue administration has decided to facilitate. That money's not allocated by Congress. How is the state of New York? How is the state of Arizona affording to pay for these people who are out on the streets. Look at New York. I mean, how many hotels there have been overtaken by the city, by the state? And I think it's the city of New York that Mayor Adams is in charge of. So it's not state money, it's city money that he's paying these hotels. And like I was saying yesterday, it may be 100 rooms in a hotel. And of course, these hotel owners are going to say, heck yeah, let's get a contract with the federal government, with the city of New York, because they're going to guarantee that we have full capacity 30 days out of the month. And this is going to be a 6 month to a year contract with them. Yes, 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 yes. We're going to be rolling in the dough. So why wouldn't these hotel owners do this? And a lot of them are like little small boutique hotels that probably struggle there in New York. But think about the tourism and the amount of people who show up in New York. So what's it doing to the economy of people who are actually coming there to spend money and stoke the economy in New York City? What's it doing to the ability for them to be able to travel and stay there if there's all these hotels that are being set aside for illegals? That's just becoming an expenditure. You don't have anything pumping into the economy if the tourists can't come. So where's that money coming from? City taxes and stuff that goes on. And then there's state income tax that they pay. And, you know, I was listening to a podcast where this woman was testifying in front of a city council meeting and talking to them. And it was a very small town. And I can't remember what state it was in, but she was talking about a couple of the hotels in their town that were set aside and housing illegals, and talking about the cost and what it was going to end up being at the end of 1 year. And it was like $480 million is what the cost was going to be to their city for what they were doing for illegals. Folks, where the hell is this money coming from? You know, Social Security is being raided. What other funds are being raided? What city funds? What state funds? You can't just say, oh yeah, let's give it to them and write a check. Every entity that is spending the money and writing the checks to support this, there is a balance, and it will be zero and negative in no time at all. So I don't understand. And this is why it's so important that we get Republicans in office. Because if we don't correct this is it, folks. Like Trump was saying yesterday, this is it. We've got to get a supermajority, a much bigger majority in Congress and in the Senate of conservatives. We got to get Trump back into office. And, you know, when I was talking to Jacqueline Parker yesterday, you know, she's in the Arizona legislation, and she was saying, you know, we were working towards getting a lot of this illegal immigration legislation put together in anticipation of Kari Lake becoming our governor, because we would have been able to just shoot that stuff through and get a lot of this stuff corrected here in the state of Arizona that's been just going by the wayside. And I said, but the powers to be, I'm sure, caught wind of that and decided, nope, we can't have that. And so things changed up here in the state of Arizona. Things didn't turn out the way that they should have. And we're suffering because of it. You know, our legislation here in the state of Arizona is really at a standstill. Nothing's been done. And I mean, here again is an expenditure for Arizona taxpayers. You know, every one of the state representatives gets paid $24,000 a year. And I think it's the same for the state senators. And all they've done is down there spinning their wheels. Republicans have a slight majority, so they've been putting together the bills. They work, have committee hearings. It's not that they're not doing the work, but once they're completed stuff, and a lot of this is bipartisan support down at the Capitol. A lot of it is on party lines, which Republicans have a very slight, slim lead here in Arizona. But when that stuff gets to the governor, veto, 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 like I was going over yesterday, she has over 148 vetoes. The highest ever of anybody any governor in the state. The highest record was held by Napolitano, and she had 58 during her tenure. So This is ridiculous. And she's only been our governor for 2 years. Barely. 22, 23, 24. Yeah. So, what is it going to be like at the end of her tenure? How are we going to get anything done in the state of Arizona? That's why we need more Republican candidates voted into office so that we have a bigger majority in the House and the Senate, so that when this veto queen governor here in Arizona, Hobbs, when she continues to veto the things that need to be passed as law and acted in Arizona, that it can come back to the House and the Senate and they can vote to override the veto and start shutting her down and letting her know this is not on our watch. This isn't going to happen. It doesn't matter that you're a Democratic governor. We're going to have strong leadership in the House and the Senate here in the state of Arizona. LD9, you've got Robert Scantlebury, who's running for LD9 state senator. Strong candidate. Very, very likable. The guy knows his stuff. And at the last minute, a few weeks ago, you had some guy come up out of the woodwork and decide he's going to run against him in the primary. Why? I could understand if the candidate that we had running for that position was a moron and an idiot and a rhino and more of a moderate or a left-leaning Republican. But this dude, Robert Scantlebury, is a strong conservative candidate. Why are you trying to mess it up? And because of his name recognition and because of him out door knocking during the 2022 campaign cycle, I know Robert's going to win. I have no doubts about that. But the unfortunate thing is this. He's got to spend some of his campaign war chest in a primary election now, instead of being able to save up all that money and use it to go after the Democrat in the general election. And that's what people don't understand. We've got a group of people, not going to name any names, but there is a group of people in the state of Arizona who is pushing to get rhinos, establishment, more moderate, left-leaning Republicans to run against the conservative candidates that they know are going to make a difference down at the Capitol. They have got to knock them out of the way. And when you talk to these people face to face, you kind of you think, oh, these people aren't that bad. They got big money, folks. They got big money, and they're trying to run the show in Arizona. And that happens all the way down to a city level, county level, state level, federal level. You got people behind the scenes who think they're going to run the show, just like you got Obama, running Joe Biden, running the Biden administration. He'll never go away. You've got those type of people in the state of Arizona doing that with the candidates here. So, and then you've got a lot of people who are new to politics and they want to run it, but you've got to understand we need the experience. We need people who have time to understand what is really happening in the state of Arizona, who get what laws and what legislation needs to come forward. You can't have green candidates coming in and stepping into a situation where they don't even know what they're doing. And we don't have time to train those people during their campaign. You've got to have strong leadership. You have to back up the strong candidates. You have to get on the websites and donate to these candidates. The Democratic money machine is unbelievable. I mean, Robert and I, and Kathy Pierce was running that in 2022. I think the Democrats spent $2.5 million in our small little legislative District 9 in Arizona to win these 3 seats, the 2 House seats and the state Senate seat. $2.5 million. And I think between the 3 of us, we spent under $200,000 running our campaign. And we were right 1,500, 1,200 votes difference in us. which never made any sense to me, that on election day, same day voting, which was all Republicans at the polling places, that difference never changed. It just stayed the same all through the election cycle. When mail-in ballots were sent out, when early voting started, that difference between us never changed, which was very suspect. But anyway, we're looking forward to the election here in November of 2023. Arizona has its primary. It's moved from August 6th to July 30th. And candidates, myself included, are out door knocking, finishing getting signatures on our petitions to get us on the ballots. If you live in LD9 in Mesa, please get on my website, https:// and the 2 Mendoza for Arizona, all spelled out.com. Go on there, hit the tab that says petition and sign my petition. And then get on there several times throughout this whole campaign period and donate. Donate to Robert Scantlebury, donate to myself, donate to the candidates in your district who you want to support. Don't donate to the Republican National Committee. Don't donate to them. They make bad decisions in who they're going to spend their money on and who they're going to support. Donate directly to the candidate of your choice. That's the best advice I can give you. And with that, my time is coming to an end. I think I'm going to get a couple guests lined up for next week because I've done enough blabbing and you guys have had to hear me go blah, 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 blah for the last week or two. So I'm looking to get some guests on. I'm working very hard to try and get Ben Berkwin on here. He agreed to be on my show. It's just a matter of finding out the right day for him. But we will get him on here and get the latest update from the Darien Gap and the people and the instances that he came across. And some of it's pretty sad, you know. I just want to tell you real quick, I have a minute. One of the people he interviewed, and if you go to his Instagram account, you can see the interview. It was a Chinese Christian man, and they had left China because his family was being persecuted because of religious beliefs, being a Christian. And him and his son or child, I think they were able, or children, were able to get out of the country, across the border, but his wife wouldn't have been able to do that. And so she had to be smuggled out of there. Anyway, the long trek that he talked about, and now here they are in the Darien Gap, and he's been stuck there for over 12 days because his wife sprained her ankle. But they were the sweetest people, and Ben was asking them, is the CCP sending Chinese spies with all of the Chinese people who are coming across the border? And they both were like, yes, 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 yes. And so they started divulging some information to him. But interesting stuff. Get on Instagram, Ben Berkwin. And I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. I will be back here again on Tuesday. Thanks for joining me.